Like the Romans, the Parthians originated on the outskirts of the Greek world, in their case, the grasslands beside the Caspian Sea. Their expansion, like the republics, was rapid. As the legions marched into Greece and Asia Minor, Parthian horsemen overran the Iranian plateau in Mesopotamia. The eastward drive of the legions met the westward push of the Parthians in the valley of the Euphrates. For the next 3 centuries, the Romans and Parthians were uneasy neighbors. The triumvir Crassus launched the first Roman-Parthian war only a few years after Pompey created the province of Syria. That campaign, which culminated in the disastrous defeat at Carrhae, launched a cycle of conflict that continued into the reign of Augustus. There was peace, then, until the time of Nero, when an Armenian succession crisis sparked an inconclusive war. Trajan briefly conquered all of Mesopotamia. Conflict became endemic in the half-century between the reign of Marcus Aurelius and the rise of the Sassanids. In these final wars, the Romans usually had the upper hand, twice burning the Parthian capital at Ctesiphon. Then, and repeatedly in the preceding centuries, Parthia seemed ripe for Roman conquest. The gods, poets and panegyrists proclaimed, had granted Rome dominion over the whole world. And for a series of Roman generals and emperors, the example of Alexander the Great lent a special allure to Eastern adventures. The Roman Empire was larger and more populous than Parthia. It had a professional army, unlike the Parthians, who relied on levies. The emperors were usually more secure than the Parthian kings, who had difficulty controlling their sons and subordinates. Yet despite these advantages, no emperor besides Trajan tried to conquer any substantial part of the Parthian Empire. The failure is made more striking by the fact that Parthian Mesopotamia was by far the most appealing region within striking distance of the legions that the Romans failed to annex. Almost everywhere else, both in North Africa and continental Europe, the Roman frontier mapped fairly neatly onto ecological limits. Beyond those limits, in regions like northern Britain or Germania, emperors tended to campaign only for glory or temporary strategic advantage. Unlike northern Britain or Germania, Mesopotamia was populous, fertile, and studded with cities, including Seleucia on the Tigris, nearly the size of Alexandria. There was no cultural barrier between it and Roman Syria. In both, the lingua franca was Aramaic, and Greek was widely spoken. The cross-frontier cultural links strengthened in late antiquity, when both Syria and Mesopotamia became hotbeds of Christianity. We'll discuss why the Romans never conquered Mesopotamia after a brief word about this video's sponsor. History isn't just written in books, it's also struck on coins. Take, for example, this drachma issued by the Parthian king Phraates IV. The reverse shows the king with a bow, the Parthian national weapon, but the legend is in Greek, illustrating Parthia's Hellenistic origins. This coin, and hundreds of others, are available at Kinzer Coins. From tetradrachms of Alexander the Great to denarii like this one of Antoninus Pius, every ancient coin is a direct connection with the past. If you want to experience that connection and hold history in the palm of your hand, visit kinzercoins.com and use the code TOLDINSTONE for a 10% discount on all purchases. Returning to our topic. Rome's inability or unwillingness to expand eastward is partially explicable in military terms. In stark contrast to the legions, Parthian armies consisted largely of cavalry. Noblemen galloped into battle on huge Nisaean war horses, mailed like medieval knights. Their lances, it was said, could transfix 2 men without shattering. Equally dangerous were the light cavalry, armed with composite bows that outranged anything in the Roman arsenal. At the Battle of Carrhae, Crassus and his 7 legions were encircled by Parthian horsemen, who showered them with arrows. When Crassus detached a force to engage with the enemy, the Parthians withdrew, lured the detachment forward, and destroyed it. The Parthians subjected the Romans to another withering barrage the following day, forcing Crassus to surrender. The disaster at Carrhae, however, was remembered because it was exceptional. More often than not, Roman armies defeated their Parthian counterparts. In the light of that fact, it seems unlikely that purely tactical concerns prevented the Romans from conquering more of their eastern rivals' territory. Logistics raised more fundamental problems. For most of its 900-mile length, the eastern frontier of the Roman Empire ran through inaccessible mountains and deserts. The only sections suitable for large-scale campaigning were Armenia and Upper Mesopotamia. Both were problematic. Lucullus's legions were caught by the snowstorms of the Armenian mountains. So, a generation later, were those of Mark Antony. During Nero's Parthian War, many soldiers lost fingers and toes to frostbite. It was comparatively easy for an army to march through Mesopotamia as long as it paralleled the Tigris or Euphrates. But away from the river's irrigated floodplains, much of the region was waterless and barren. Crassus and his legions struggled over endless sandhills. A century and a half later, scarcity of water and fodder forced Trajan to raise his siege of Hatra. Both mountains and deserts, however, could be crossed by well-provisioned Roman armies. Nero's commanders set up a supply line that began at Trapezus on the Black Sea, crossed the Pontic Alps, and followed the Araxes River into Armenia, a distance of well over 300 miles. During the same war, Domitius Corbulo led a 275-mile forced march over a desolate plateau. Trajan brought about 80,000 men, an army twice the size of Alexander's, through Mesopotamia without suffering significant casualties. That most of Mesopotamia remained in Parthian hands was a historical accident, in the sense that the Romans would probably have kept the region if Trajan had lived longer. But it also reflected the calculation, made again and again by a series of emperors, that the conquest of Mesopotamia, let alone the Parthians' eastern provinces, was undesirable. In their wars with the Parthians, the emperors sought quick victory, ideally seasoned with a goodly leaven of loot. Both sides seem to have expected that war would leave the balance of power basically unaltered, with only a few border cities changing hands. Even Trajan envisioned a limited conquest, which would leave everything east of Mesopotamia under the control of a Parthian king allied to Rome. The Parthian Empire was simply too big to conquer. Even Alexander had struggled to subdue the vast and rugged Iranian plateau, and beyond the plateau stretched the steppes of Central Asia, open to the raids of nomads. The Romans, like the Ottomans a millennium and a half later, could have pushed their eastern frontier to the foothills of the Zagros Mountains. Any campaign beyond that would have involved them in a world they were ill-equipped to attack, let alone rule. The emperors seem to have understood this. Even in times of peace, it would have been foolhardy to strip the European frontiers and empty the treasury in pursuit of Alexander's dream. Fantasies of Eastern conquest, in short, faded in the harsh light of geopolitical realities. The existence of two empires in the Middle East came to seem embedded in the natural order of things. The two eyes of the world, as one Persian diplomat put it. Until the final cataclysmic war that brought about the end of antiquity, it was taken for granted that the Roman Empire would always have an eastern neighbor. Wait! Before you go on to the next Told in Stone video, I have a special announcement. Next spring, I'm leading a group tour to the Roman ruins of Spain. We'll see the great amphitheater at Italica, the birthplace of Trajan and Hadrian. We'll cross the longest Roman bridge in existence, stand beneath the towering aqueduct at Segovia, explore the ruins beneath the streets of Barcelona, and much more, all in the company of yours truly and an experienced Spanish historian. To learn more, follow the link on screen and in the description. Thanks. Hope to see you in Seville. In the latest episode of Rome in Review, my series exploring movies and shows set in the ancient world, I reviewed Monty Python's Life of Brian. You can watch it, along with all the earlier episodes, on the Told & Stone Patreon. There's more great content on my other channels, Told & Stone Footnotes and Scenic Routes to the Past, including a new episode of the long-neglected Told & Stone podcast. Enjoy, and thanks for watching.